It's episode number 300. I want to say thank you very much for all of you folks for hanging out with us for 300 plus episodes. We've done plenty of pluses. We may not even be at 300. Really, we may be at 280, and I just don't know how to count. I don't know, but we're saying we're at 300, and that's just the way that the things are going to happen here. Everyone but Casper and I have posted notes. We don't know how these things work or anything. So yeah, there you go. Anyhow, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Gutenberg and
again.
It's not called Gutenberg anymore.
The
block editor.
Wait! I have the perfect term. It's the G that must not be named.
The G must not be named.
The block editor.
Like I watched Morton's videos on LinkedIn, and I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, all he keeps talking about is block editor. What the heck's this block editor thing? It's called Gutenberg. Come on. What's going on here? No, it's not called Gutenberg, apparently. All right, Morton, you run the show here. Morton, tell us a bit about yourself.
I am Morton. I have opinions.
They're all his own.
That's all you need to know.
They're all his own. Awesome. Well, thanks for being on, Morton. I appreciate it. How about you, Steve? Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Steve Zangen. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup. I'm taking this off my head now.
Good to have you on. Good to have you on as always. How about you, Ross?
Ross Scala here from DigiCal, and I co-organize the We Are meetup. This Monday here at my office, we're not only going to have a lot of cool topics, we're also going to give away an Amazon Dot, the brand new one, the generation.
Tap devices, my favorite.
Third generation just came out. We're going to give that away here at my office. We're going to have holiday goodies. And Jason, the organizer of this video stream, he's also a coordinator. He's going to be bringing pizza. So
yes,
there you go.
I always bring pizza. Yep. I bring all the carbs.
That's right.
Pizza at a developer meetup? Wow, that's really
right.
really out
that's
of the
right.
box. Crazy.
RSVP now, we have limited seating. So there you go.
Limited seating.
That's right.
I love evergreen content. It's my favorite.
Say, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
My name is Say Reed, and I also have opinions. I contain them so much to this show that they're contained somewhat, but still somehow everyone knows I have them. I'm not sure that's how that works, but anyway, I make WordPress, teach WordPress, preach WordPress. At Say Reed Media on all the things.
I like that you think you're containing your opinions.
It's really hard to contain them.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
Casper, tell us about your containment.
I can't necessarily speak much about my containment, but what's up, everybody? I am Jason Casper, aka the Big Bopper. Hello, world, baby.
You know, that song is so problematic.
Oh, that's so good. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over on Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. I do this show here as well as the show WP Blab. Feel free to go take a look at that. And just so you know, and just so Say remembers, this particular show is brought to you by ServerPress, makers of desktop server. And this episode is being streamed on a bunch of things. We're streaming on YouTube, we're streaming on Twitter, and we're streaming on my personal Facebook as well as the Facebook over on WPwatercooler's Facebook page. So thank you
Hi, everybody.
ServerPress for helping us out. We appreciate that.
300 episodes in, and now we're on every platform. You cannot escape us.
But isn't that a problem with the canonical source and SEO?
We're so not concerned with indexing. So far from our minds.
So far.
So far.
Okay, so to kind of you mentioned something at the top here, Morton, regarding the idea that we've been calling it Gutenberg forever, but now we're calling it the block editor.
Mm-hmm.
But then we told Drupal it's okay to use Gutenberg. So did we just take Gutenberg and we just kind of threw it at Drupal and said, here, use the word Gutenberg, we call it the block editor now? Is that what happened?
So
that has to be what happened.
Yeah. So
what did we do? That's such a question you ask. What did we do?
Yeah. So yeah. A long time ago, a discussion started in the Gutenberg repo specifically about this particular issue, which is the code name for this project has suddenly become a name that is associated with the project, which is not great.
That shall go down in infamy.
That's not something you normally do because it causes huge problems.
Mojave.
Windows 95.
That's so weird.
You're like, yeah, okay. Windows 95.
Jason and I have a weird cough that we need to get checked out.
Windows 95 is an actual product name, whereas Gutenberg is an actual code name. But like, I come out here to talk about serious shit, and you people are all joking.
You're on the water cooler.
Hey, I'm serious. I'm serious.
This is what I deal with.
I just like how people think I'm so serious all the time.
Morton, you've been on this show before. You know what to expect.
That was not me. That was someone else that looks a lot like me. No, the decision to stick with the Gutenberg name until like 2 days before release was a terrible one. It should never have happened. I think
there were only a couple of those in this process, one or two. Just one or two.
I think the idea of, like, if you think about Gutenberg as or like this block editor as an agnostic thing that other platforms can adopt, I actually think the idea of keeping the Gutenberg name to refer to the larger web project called Gutenberg makes sense. But then internally, when it gets baked into WordPress or Drupal or Magento or whatever, it should just be the block editor. There is a communication problem there because, you know, you'll have like things like that Gutenberg Cloud, which is the idea is you can make blocks that can be used in any implementation of the block editor, but it's called Gutenberg Cloud. So users are going to be super confused about this until the end of time because there's another project, Gutenberg, that is enormously important and is used and has an API and JavaScript libraries and all this kind of stuff. That is the open source book publishing service for all public domain books in the world. So it's not like there's any conflict here or anything.
So we didn't check our namespace, huh? That's smart.
I think that, you know, going into this, no one knew, you know, what was going to happen over the 2 years. And to be quite honest, let's be real, the expectations were very different from the results. So, you know, the naming, I mean, obviously that's a problem you come up with. The naming that they did at the beginning is definitely not, so they weren't thinking about like, oh, this code name's going to stick and this is going to be a thing in the community for 2 years. Like nobody thought that. So, you know. The user is not going to call it Gutenberg. The user is not going to call it anything but the new editor. They're barely even going to call it the block editor.
They're going to call it WordPress.
They're just going to call it WordPress. They're going to call it their website. You know, they're going to call it cool because they already do. And that's it. Like we're the ones who get hung up on nomenclature, naming spaces. Developers get hung up in naming. Weird.
Who would have thought?
Like we never called the site Tiny MCE, right? WordPress. Yeah. We never call it. You know,
I mean, developers did. That's not true. Developers often refer to Tiny MCE. Like, and if you said that to a user, they have no idea what you're talking about. But if you say that to a developer, they're like, oh yeah, the Tiny MCE. It's a thing. It's a notarietal thing. But
the formal name is now block editor, and referring to the block editor internally is block editor.
So if you were to say, you know, like in your training, do you say, okay, you know, add a page, you click here and open the block editor? You don't say that. You just say add a page.
Editor.
Open a page. You just open the editor.
No, but you're going to get a block and stick it into the block editor.
Yeah, I think I say block editor because the block editor is moving outside of the content.
Right. And it has text blocks in it. So
you are editing blocks.
Yeah, you're editing blocks.
Yo, dog.
It's this nomenclature that this is the stuff I wish we'd been working on. Like, how do we say this to people instead of like everybody just freaking out about like the inevitability of JavaScript? Like,
take the cow path, say, just start being consistent about nomenclature and it happens.
So now that
was the greatest analogy ever. And those were real pictures you took, by the way, right?
Yeah. Like, you're close. You can get in your car and drive up there and you can see it.
To the LinkedIn.
It's in Carpinteria. It's like an hour and a half outside.
That sounds like a fun drive to go see a path. That sounds like a good idea. I'm just kidding.
So now that we have the block editor and we have the blocks that live within the block editor, you know, one of the concerns that Morton was bringing up on Twitter was the idea of styling these blocks and then having those styles be inherited by the theme in which they're going to live on, or that the person that's developing those blocks are going to apply styles to it. or that person who's building those blocks are going to have to make sure that that block is compatible with a whole bunch of themes. Like there's many ways to kind of look at this to design a block and then actually make a block look good when you stick it on there.
That's the same exact thing people could say for yeah.
Yeah, with widgets, you had the same problem. You had a H1 tag that you stuck on the top, you put some text below it, and hopefully things looked great. But block editors, or the block is different than a widget that's going to live in the corner in a sidebar, which half the sites nowadays don't even have sidebars anymore.
I've been waiting for this moment in theme evolution for a very long time, honestly, because themes have been for, and I've talked about this. I did a whole talk on it at like 4 LA WordCamps ago or something about how the themes were just a mess. They were just a nightmare of no standardization. I mean, since the theme, even the theme customizer, when theme options were like all crazy and like different versions and everything, it hasn't gotten better, because even if the customizer standardizes it, it's still crazy amounts of different things and different UIs within the customizer.
But
so
yeah,
it's
the
been a
customizer
nightmare.
is customizable.
Right. So that's the problem, that, if we're getting away, like my theme dream would be that themes would hold, styles and colors and basic layout formats. That's like what they're supposed to do. That's what they've been made to do. They're CSS skins, essentially. And then the stuff inside should not, crazy override that. We have that problem. You get that with like the events calendar. Yeah, exactly. Like you can choose to override the CSS styles or use their CSS styles. Like that sounds beautiful to me. It sounds like simple and clean, like not a problem. And then we can get rid of all of this theme stuff. And I'm sorry for all the theme developers out there in Theme Forest. Your time is over.
No, you're not.
Done now. I'm not.
I'm not sorry for anybody on the developers on Theme.
They've made their gold rush. The theme gold rush is over, is what I would predict. It's over for
I think
time being.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in both the short term and the long term, because this undefined stage 2 of the Gutenberg project seems to indicate that blocks are going to move everywhere inside a space, and then you have kind of a view where you place blocks wherever you want. Almost like someone talked about this at WordCamp US last year or something.
What? Who would have thought?
Who's like thinking into the future? I don't know.
The interesting, this is a huge opportunity, but it's also a really big challenge, because unless WordPress establishes really quickly a way of doing this correctly so that it's unified and everyone does it the same way, we'll have a bunch of plugins that will solve the problem in different ways, and we'll have this total chaos where it's impossible to build solutions for it.
To that point, I know this is a side point, but I would like to real quick. I think that is almost, I'm starting to believe that is almost by design. Like that is actually almost the way that some of the leadership, let's just say, hi, Matt, kind of wants people to just like build all the things and duke it out and let the best thing win. That's almost like we don't have to make a decision if everybody just fights these things together, and then, whatever happens to make it wins.
Well, you got to remember that there was.
I don't think it's great. I just said I think that's what it seems like is happening.
There was at one point where we would take the WordPress plugins and we'd bake them into we'd take them out and we'd bake them into a theme to make sure that no matter what, it's going to look the way that it needs to look. And I think we're going to have that same problem again. Mm-hmm. That we were taking a version of a plugin, and maybe it's a form plugin or a contact plugin or like any of those sorts of things. You're going to have to deal with that. And I don't know what we're going to end up doing.
What's
crazy world?
What's SASAT? I mean, yeah, that's where we need to go, is this where the content editor, block editor, whatever you want to call it, is the unified experience that allows you to add blocks, put content into the blocks, lay out the blocks, and then the theme, or whatever we want to call it, provides templates and unified styling for that. So you basically choose a look for your site, and then you get templates you can use. But the problem with that is, for that to work, WordPress actually has to be a page builder. WordPress has to be a layout builder. And that's where the schism is, because a lot of people who are working internally on this project do not want WordPress to be a layout builder. And the reason why that's a problem is there's this thing called, there are two things, one called resiliency and the other one called accessibility, and they have the same requirement. If you take away all the cruft, what you need is a formatted HTML document that has a logical structure and is structured properly. In an environment where you have a page builder where you can drag and drop blocks anywhere within the layout, you have to make sure that if you take away the layout, you have this structured HTML document. That means in the block builder, you then have to have basically two panels. One where you say, this is the logical order of my content and the actual semantic order of my content. And then from there, I can then drag the blocks out and position them within the view. That is a level of customization and a level of cognitive load that you put on the user, which simply is not tenable to most of the people who use WordPress. So what will end up, so then you have the templates, right, which say, we've made the structure for you. You just fill in the blocks, right? And that has to be something WordPress does, because if every plugin tries to solve this problem, half of them will not have the content order system in place. They will all do it in a different way. It'll be totally chaotic to switch between different sites. And we'll basically be back in that hellhole we were in a couple of years ago, where every plugin had their own settings panel in the back end, and it was all just total chaos and no one understood anything.
We're still kind of there, just a little.
But we're just introducing a whole new level of that inside the editor.
Yay. And not coming up with rules for it ahead of time.
Themes are not
novel
dying,
concept
changing into something entirely different.
I do want
to be okay when the editor just moves to the front end and nobody has to look at the back end anymore.
Well, one thing that has been
I don't actually think that, by the way.
Well, Matt, who is the great decider, and I might start calling him that, is that he is clear he doesn't want a front end editor. He said so in the most recent interview he did with Brian Krogsgaard.
Krogsgaard. That was a very Scandinavian name.
Yeah. My main concern, and I don't believe that this is something, one of the main selling features for WordPress one of the reasons I use it over everything else, other than, a million reasons, is the database. And this is something that I talk to, even my clients about, because that allows them this concept of data portability. And I am a little concerned. I'm not I don't go deep on my programming skills. So things get a little fuzzy and I'm like, okay, someone and that deep part, can you explain that to me down there? So, Gutenberg's already a little bit weird with its markup and how it turns it into, not necessarily just totally portable data. It has to get stripped. It has to get whatever. Does anyone see a future where the database is not part of WordPress? So should I start panicking now? No, we're all good. Everyone's like, yes, we need database in order to have the decoupled apps with all the stuff.
Yeah.
Glad we're all on the same page with that.
With APIs.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So the content blob stays until within the foreseeable future. I think Matthias, I talked to Matthias about this this summer, and he made a good point that I'm not sure if this was originally planned that way, but it's what it ended up being. I was asking him about why, when you save blocks, you're actually just saving blocks inside the content, right? So there's one form entry inside the database that has the entire setup, and you have all these weird comments. Really weird. And I said, why do we do that? Why don't we have, each of these pieces is their own data element, and then we have some sort of JSON type thing that says these pieces are the ones that go into this post? That would make more sense from a data structure perspective. And he said, well, we want it to be so that if WordPress basically fails, you have a WordPress site, WordPress collapses on you, the database gets messed up, you should be able to go into the content folder, the content table, and pull out the entire piece of the entire post. And if you separate that out, you would then have an abstraction layer where you need to pull the list of blocks that go into it and then piece it together again. So it's a way of preserving resiliency. Now, that's a really good argument to keep it the way it is now. However, I am 100% certain that was not the thinking when the decision was made. This is it's a byproduct. This is a rewriting of history to justify, right? So it's one of those, the decision ended up being probably the right decision, but that's not how it came about. So.
I hate that stuff, because then I'm like, now I don't know how to feel about that, damn it. But I'm glad that all the minds here think that that's something that we're going to keep for at least a while.
Well, reusable blocks breaks that entire concept anyway. So.
Yeah.
Great.
What about, is there a way of being able to
Great. Good times.
test those blocks? And has somebody come up with a way of testing for essentially for compatibility with all themes that are out there when you're kind of dragging and dropping in blocks?
Yeah.
So that way they keep with, I mean, is there a term or something that we can use to describe a visual unit test in a way, like a way of being able to make sure that these things don't collide or anything?
There's a theme unit test that has blocks in it now. The official theme unit test there's a branch on the GitHub repo that has the blocks. But there are no layout blocks so far, right? Because this entire situation we're talking about doesn't exist yet.
Well, I mean, you do have like columns, for instance.
Yeah,
and
that's
if
in
you
the
have
theme.
and if you have a block that isn't staying within its boundaries, which I saw a few of them early on, where it's like, oh, I just dragged this block in here. Wait, why is this block 30 pixels in all directions bigger than its container? What happened here?
Because it's a super block.
Yeah. I was learning how divs work, and now this whole thing kind of just went nuts.
Yep.
So we need that as well. Then, would you guys all agree that there needs to be something that we can, pretty much throw a bunch of blocks in there and see if it looks okay or not? Because when we get to the point where, the block editor becomes the entire page, editing space, that you're going to have to worry about that.
Well, one of the ways of approaching this, which is usually done in design projects like this, is you start by building the output you want. So you mark up an HTML document the way that you would think it should be, and then you make the entire layout the way that you think it should be, and then you make maybe like almost like a CSS Zen Garden thing. You make an HTML document, and you make like 18 different layouts, and you say, we're going to try to achieve all of these using an interface. What pieces do we need to have in an interface for this to be possible, right? That is, if I was head of this project, that's where I would go. I would say, we're going to make this unified HTML document, and then we're going to just put it into this community, and everyone make, the front-facing look that they want with this, and the layouts that they think they were going to do, and not just for now, but for later, and make them responsive and make them work for everything. And then we say, okay, what are the pieces? How do we make the interface allow for this to happen? Because then at least we can have a unit test that would become the unit test for it, right?
Yeah, Steve's been typing. I think he just registered Gutenberg Zen Garden and Block Editor Zen Garden.
So I want to touch on something that's not
me, by the way.
Related to that technical. Oh, that's not you typing?
No.
We all thought it was you. Okay.
No, I don't type.
Ross, stop typing. I can see Jason's hands. When we're talking about
I have a quiet keyboard.
Direction that WordPress should go, you're like, if I were running this, or so something that has come up time after time after time with Gutenberg, and has really shown, I think, some of the cracks in the community and in the structure that we have happening within WordPress, is that with half the the discussion happening in half on Slack, half on GitHub, half on Track. No one really knows where these discussions are happening. And there's also not a very clear roadmap coming from Matt, coming from the team, coming from anyone. And there's no one place for this. So this is something that I think is really important, because we don't have a space within which to talk about these concepts. Maybe you see where I'm going with this segue. So something that you brought up in your talk with your various speakers that you had was this concept of the WordPress governance project. And I definitely want to ask you about that. But I have one quick question to clarify first. On the interview that Matt did with Brian, he and Brian were questioning your intent, not in a skeptical way.
Yeah,
but
I heard it.
Yeah, they didn't know what you meant. Did you mean WordPress's role within the larger web community, or governance of WordPress itself and the project? They took it larger web community. I had imagined it to be talking about WordPress governance. So could you clarify, please, your intention?
It's both.
Oh, great. That clears it right up. Thank you.
Yeah, so we need governance in the WordPress project for the health of WordPress itself. And governance in this circumstance means we need to have policies in place and ways to enforce those policies We need to have ways for people to have input on those policies. We need to have representatives who are responsible for managing those policies, and so on and so on. So basic governance of a large project, so that we can trace decision making and figure out who makes decisions in what fora. How does this happen?
Who we is, if you will.
Yeah, who we is, exactly.
Who we is.
But an essential part of that is for us to be able to take part in the larger web governance. That means representation in government, representation in NGOs, representation when decisions are made about the web through W3C, about the internet through various government bodies and so on. For us to be able to do that, we first need policies, and we need to be able to appoint people to be our representatives in those environments. And for that, we also need governance internally. So it's one of those chicken and egg situations. They both need to be there. But in our situation, we can actually say we need the internal governance first, so we actually know who we are and what we stand for before we can move forward into open governance. And yeah, so it's starting January. We're starting the project. It's going to be fast tracked like crazy. We're going to try to propose something by the summer.
So I have a question to ask you, just to turn the spotlight on you. Who's we? Ding.
Oh, right now,
Who's your we?
I'm talking about is the people that have been thinking about this. And the scope of we's power right now is picking a date and time for the meeting and setting a preliminary agenda. Right? It's like we, the people who are working on this right now, very specifically do not have a decision-making power in this project. We are simply booting it up so that a meeting can be happening. And it's a matter of talking to people to find out that we're not overlapping with other meetings and getting a channel to have the meeting in, that kind of stuff. So it's very technical, just organizational components.
Structural we. I'm just clarifying because we're all clarifying who the we's are. So I'm just letting you clarify.
It sounds like we're building a country, though.
I mean, it's like, look at this. It's a third of the web. It's a third of the internet. It's the global thing. It's a kind of a big deal.
WordPress is a political organization in everything but name. So
we need a Speaker of the House, and we need all of those sorts of pieces to it.
Well, there are ways of doing governance that actually work. They don't come from web governance. They come from other types of organizations.
Right.
The key is just we need to have clear structures. I mean, think about it. Right now, we have a BDFL, a benevolent dictator for life. The last part of the BDFL is concerning because that means what happens if Matt decides to just be like, no, I'm going to Mars with Elon Musk, right?
Which, by the way, not outside of the realm of possibility. I would actually put that on him. So it's like,
I think he wasn't he on the Virgin Galaxy rocket that went up yesterday?
But it's like this is not a tenable management structure for 32% of the web at all, right?
I'd argue it's a dangerous structure because the impact that WordPress could have on so Facebook, yes, data security. I'm even just talking from an economical and economy standpoint, from all of just the people I've set up with WordPress sites, right? Which is probably close to like 1,000 people, which is insane, right? But if all of their sites stop working, their businesses are actually, I've had clients contact me after last week's update and they're like, it's broken, it's whatever. So, that does have an economic impact. That does have an impact beyond just the commercial aspects of the web development industry. It has far-reaching things that are happening. So I'm fully on board for this. And this is actually, incidentally, what I thought the Growth Council was going to be, because I was on the Growth Council, which was and is now no longer. And I thought we were going to be talking about things like this, like how to structure this stuff. We did not talk about that. So I'm really glad that there's a forum where we'll be able to have these conversations.
If you consider WooCommerce and all the people that are running WooCommerce, it absolutely has an economic impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like dramatic, and not only that, the tax collection in WooCommerce, the tax collection plugin affects a lot of things for the people paying it, for the people receiving it. If there are errors in that, if there's just, even just user error because it's poorly made, that's problematic for a lot of people.
WordPress is mission critical to millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
Every decision, every arbitrary decision WordPress makes has a direct impact on the lives of millions of people.
I think that is one of the most important sentences, and maybe should be the lead sentence of the governance project kickoff, because that's really true. It does. And if we all just only look at our own little square, it's like, whatever, it's just some software, just an open source community, it doesn't matter. If you take into what you just said, like if you look at that, really, it really does matter a lot.
Yeah, remember the promise of 5.0.1 coming out a week after the original release, and it was going to fix Gutenberg problems? Did anyone pay attention to the release that actually came out and what that did?
Security
update!
That security update has been sitting on file for a long time.
Oh, they knew about that one?
Oh yeah, it's been held back by, as far as I understand, and I'm not on the security team, so I don't speak for them, but to my understanding, that security update has been sitting there waiting for the release because no changes were going to be made to core, which is one of those decisions that is not okay.
That's a
Of
little
course, I could
gut
be
punch.
wrong, so like I'll put a caveat on that. This could all be just
Rumor has it.
rumor.
Wouldn't
but-
it be great if we had some like actual source of real information that we could?
Well, you can't talk about security issues publicly because
Right. I mean, like, but now it would be good to know now, right? Like, anyway.
yeah.
Look
It
at
makes
the
it, it makes it
about-
hard.
Look at
It
the
makes it hard
time.
when they say
Yeah.
that there's going to be no 499 and okay, we got a security update. So, but Jason, you were saying we're out of time?
Yeah, look at the time. Thank you all for coming out and hanging out with us, watching us on all the various platforms that are out there. Feel free to go and subscribe to us. You can subscribe to us by going to wpwatercooler.com/subscribe, where you can learn how to subscribe to us on all the different platforms that are out there. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.